Okay, so this is the Gossamer Gear Gorilla 50, and this is what I decided to bring on my trip. Now, this is not an Ultimate Direction fast pack. The main reason I brought the Gossamer Gear Gorilla 50 is because it just had a lot more storage capacity. My Ultimate Direction Fast Pack 40 is around 40 liters. This one is around 50 liters. What does that mean? It means I don't have to start the trip with either water or my food hanging out in the back of the pack in some sort of random stuff sack, which gets annoyingly in the way if I ever want to open or close the backpack. So I jumped up and used the Gossamer Gear Gorilla. There's a lot of things I like about this backpack. I made a previous video called basically modifications I have done to my fast pack, and I didn't plan it, but a lot of the modifications I made, this pack has baked in, so that's great. The obvious one is it has a hip belt, and it works really well of transferring the weight of the pack to my hips and off my freaking shoulders. I was so comfortable using this pack with my load on this trip. The fast packs for Ultimate Direction, I'm going to say are rated for like 15 pounds tops. Like, they expect you to be running in them. And to be honest, I was really pushing the design capabilities of these fast packs way over what their intended uses were. So it's no surprise that like an ultralight backpack works better for ultralight backpacking. Like we talked about in the sleep system, you can store a closed cell sleeping pad in the back area where the back padding of the backpack goes, and have kind of like a dual purpose, 2 for 1. That works great for me. I found this super comfortable. There was a problem, again, like a lot of my gear, where it was so hot on that ridge where the sun was beating down on me and there was no cover at all, that my lower back specifically got so warm, especially when I ran out of water for hours on end, and I could just feel like the heat emanating from my back and not having anywhere to go. My lower back got very, very sweaty. I don't have a solution to that because most ultralight backpacks don't have like a hammock system to allow a little bit of airflow. One thing I did do was take my 4-liter water flask that would be filled with, say, melting snow, and I put it in this little sleeve and then put the backpack back on. That was as close to heaven as I believe I could have gotten on the trip. It was so nice. It was something I was like, I wonder if that will work. I should try that beforehand. I'd never tried it. And then I was just on the trip itself. So hot, so miserable. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, why don't I just put the snow on my back and it would be like icing my back? And it worked. I couldn't believe it. Other things I like about it, the hip belt worked great for me. The internal frame worked great for me. It's just an upside down U of aluminum. I didn't bring so much weight. This pack weight is much lighter than I did for 2019. We'll get into those details later. So it was altogether more comfortable anyways, no matter what pack I use. I really love the center pocket here. It's much bigger than my other packs. So I was able to put a ton more stuff in the center pocket than I usually do. Some modifications I did for the pack is I bought the washer bottle holder, and I use this for my phone case holder, we'll call it, for the straps, the shoulder straps. And both these are sold by Gossamer Gear, which makes the pack. And other than that, I just shortened some of these straps just to make it a little lighter. We're talking about a few grams, but every gram counts. I really like the pockets on the hip belt. Those worked well for me too. I find backpacks very individual. What works for one person doesn't work for another. But this thing blew me away. I really loved it. I did test and review this pack for Outdoor Gear Lab 2, so if you're looking for a full review, it's there. I'll leave a link in the description again. One of the things while testing that really stood out for me is the weight to volume ratio for this pack was really great. I think it was 0.6 liters for every ounce of the pack or something like that. Really great number. And the funny thing is that this pack actually weighed less than my fast pack that I did the modifications to. And the modifications were reinforcing some of the pockets and adding a hip belt. So it's great to be able to go up in volume and go down in weight. I'm looking forward to harassing the designers at Ultimate Direction and getting them to make a higher capacity fastpack and using this as a lot of inspiration, as well as some other ideas I have floating around, as well as like continuing the legacy and the design of the current fastpacks. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm saying that that would be a dream collab with the very smart and talented designers at Ultimate Direction. I did use some trekking poles. These are the BDFLZ carbons. These are really great. I love these poles because they have a little bit of adjustability, which is great when you're putting up a tarp that you want to have nice and taut. This particular pole is broken. I broke it on the route. That didn't surprise me at all. There's just so many opportunities to destroy a trekking pole on the route, and I found one. Unfortunately, I lost my other trekking pole. I was about 6 hours into not having any water, and in my dehanced state, I left it on a rock. So I only had this broken trekking pole. And thankfully it's broken, but it was broken in a way that I could still put up my tarp. So I was so happy. I wish I had known it was in a state to put up my tarp the night before when I had two, but I used just the other one for that night. So I'm Justin. So now I know. I'm a destroyer of trekking poles. I don't know if I would buy these again, knowing that I am just going to break them. Again, I don't like to just going through gear left and right and just destroying things and throwing them away. I might move back to a different type of design or something that I know is going to be a little bit more burlier. I think that's going to take a little bit more research on my part to tell you the best trekking poles for me, a very muscular 190-pound, 5'11" dude. If you're like 145-pound ultra runners, these might be too heavy. This might be too much pole for you. So one of the final things we're going to talk about in this video is my water system. So this is my main water storage system. This is a 4-liter flask from sea to summit called the Water Cell X. What really sets this apart from any other water flask that I've used is the material. As you can see, it's not that like see-through plasticky material. It feels rubberized and woven, and I've had this for years and it has yet to spring a leak. Now, I usually can go with like one of those plastic see-through water flasks for a couple of trips before it starts leaking on me. I did not want leakage on this trip, so I went with the big boy here. 4 liters is also a ton of storage, probably more than you usually use for something like the CT, the AT, the PCT, etc. I needed that much storage. There are some very, very dry carries. For example, to begin the trip, I didn't know if there was going to be any water source for about 30 miles. 30 miles and 15,000 feet of elevation getting lost. So I started the trip with this thing fully filled, plus my supplemental water carrying devices, which I'll get into soon. So I was super happy to have that much carrying capacity. So most of the water on the route is locked up in snowfields, and I needed a way to carry all that snow, knowing that when it melted, it would take up less volume. So I had to start with a large volume, and then once it melted, it's going to be like half the volume or even less. So I needed something as large as that. This thing works fantastic. It still hasn't sprung a leak. I can't wait to use it more. It's not as lightweight as other options, but for this trip where having this capacity is critical, it worked fantastically. To supplement the 4 liters of carrying capacity in the Water Cell X, I brought 2 cycling water bottles. So I know that these aren't as light as other options like a smart water bottle or a cheap gas station water bottle, but I do love that they are reusable for basically ever, and the wide mouth on these is perfect for putting in powdered nutrition, and that was basically half of my calories that I brought. And they're really easy to put in and out of both the side pockets of my backpack, plus that supplemental front pocket that I brought. I was really happy with this. I'm glad I didn't lose one. I hate when I lose water bottles on route. I used one primarily to keep water in with the white cap, and primarily to keep water with the powder nutrition mixed up already with the orange, so I always knew which one was which. Kept one in my side and one up front, so I'd always have access to water and didn't have to go to the flask all the time. That works for me, even though these are a little bit heavier than other options. If I was to do the PCT or the CT, I might suggest using maybe one of these for your nutrition to mix up, and one swap out with a smart water bottle of the same capacity, and you can save a couple of grams. Probably what I'm going to do. Okay, water treatment. I brought Aquatabs, a couple of these, when I had access to a lot of water, which was not quite all that often, maybe 2 times on the entire 120-mile route. There is a spring on day 2, and there is a ditch. There's a literal ditch on day 6 for me? Day 5 for me, where I used four of these Aquatabs for the 4 liters that my flask could take. So these work really well. I mean, I just wait an hour or overnight or something. Pretty hard to muck up. Other than that, I used a small water filter. This is, of course, the Katahdin Be Free 600 milliliter. And that worked really great, even on those water sources where I wanted to use the Aquatabs. If I need water right away, I just filled my water bottles with this, and then even use this to carry an additional 600 milliliters. That would make the amount of water I could carry at once over 6 liters, counting the 4-liter flask, those 2 water bottles, and this. And I'll have to tell you, I used that on day 6, and I absolutely wish I had more carrying capacity, because by the middle of the day, I was out of water with no water source close by. I was looking at like a snowfield way in the distance at like 12,500 feet, 13,000 feet. And I got to it, and it was just a scar in the mountain. It wasn't snow. It was just white rock showing through. I couldn't believe it. And like the water source that was also snow was like a mile further. Trying night, I'll tell you what. Anyways, yeah, usually you want to bring 2 different ways to treat your water. So those are my 2 different ways. And that was my water system. No sponge this time. The sponge was a good idea, but I just didn't think I needed it. I had, like, my buff, right? Of course.